Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. Welcome to Fett263 presents Fun with Saber Effects for Proffieboard. This is my 8th episode. I see I already have some people in the chat. Let me catch up with everybody. Hey, Max. Hey, Ronan Sabers. Hey, Megtooth, you made it. Heckler. Hey, Mike. Thanks everybody for joining. Tonight I have one main thing I wanted to cover, but I'm gonna also I'll answer questions as I have time. And I also wanted to give an update on ProffiOS 5.2 plus the 5.2 version of my prop file, which is now in beta testing. So I wanted to give a little bit of an update there. So on the screen, and actually let's go full screen. So the battle mode has its own thread, whereas the OS 5.2 has a separate thread. So if you have questions related to my prop file or related to battle mode, etc., you can post them in this thread on TRA, and I'll put the link in the description. For those of you who are in alpha testing, and I know I said it in a number of places, but the alpha test for battle mode was very small, and it was meant to be really just the functionality, but not a lot of customization. Since alpha, this new version has a ton of customization, which I covered last week, but I wanted to give everybody kind of an update. So the write-up is all different. Also, some of the controls are different. And the reason for that is one of the features that I'm going to show tonight, plus another feature that we covered last night. We actually added in a few other features, also added some new gestures. So because of that, the controls from the alpha, for those of you who were using the alpha version to the beta, did change. And I know I've answered in a lot of places, but I figure since I'm live, I would do that as well. And then in addition, in testing, if you go in this thread, all the way down here, I made this and I posted this in a bunch of places just to give, this is just a super easy kind of high level overview of the gestures. So swing is pretty straightforward, but I wanted to let everybody know how swing is calculated or how swing is figured in the Proffieboard is actually the change in angle. And it's based on speed. So if you slowly change that angle, that's not a swing. But the swing is actually because the blade is changing angle quickly. That's what creates a swing. And usually the arc is going to be a little bit longer to get a swing trigger than the pull away gesture. The pull away gesture is related to lockup as well as melt and drag. And that's for when you're in battle mode using full gesture control without the buttons. If you do a lockup, if you do melt, if you do drag, you can move your saber. And like I said, speed is a factor. So you can move your saber. You can even move the angle, particularly the lockup. If you're doing the responsive lockup, you're able to change that angle fine as long as it's normal movements. To get the pull away, it's actually a quick, kind of a small change in angle, but the speed is a part of it. So speed isn't shown here, but the speed of it, you're going to have to get used to based on how you handle the saber. It's also. Oops, my phone is all of a sudden talking to itself. I gotta turn that off. Sorry about that. But yeah, so the pull away gesture is, you don't have to do a big swing. That's really the reason I wanted to show it here, is it's essentially almost half of the movement. You still need to be quick enough to trigger, but practice basically just changing that angle a little bit with some speed to it, and that's where you'll get that pull away. You can do a full swing away, it's fine. It's just the minimum amount of movement to get pull away is not nearly as much as what's needed for a swing. Stab is pretty straightforward, but I wanted to show the difference between stab and thrust. So thrust is new. Now, thrust and stab actually are identical movements, as you can see. But the difference is stab ends with a clash or an impact, or if you jerk your hard, if you really come to a hard stop, or if you pull with a sudden impact, that will also trigger what's considered a clash to it. So stab and thrust, stab has a little bit more to it. Thrust is easier to ignite, particularly for the forward motion. Now, a few people in the TRA thread have had, because of their speakers, has actually had some false thrusts. How you would find it is if you have thrust on activated, and you find that when you turn your saber off, all of a sudden it ignites itself. If you hook up to the serial monitor, you'll see it. It's most likely your speaker, in terms of being too close to the board, is probably triggering that movement, because the thrust movement can be a forward or backward movement, and it's linear. Technically, if you have a really loud speaker with a lot of bass and that board is really tight up against it, it could trigger it. I didn't experience it myself, but because I got the serial monitor data from some people, that's what was happening. So if you find that you're getting that, if you can insulate your board, insulate the board from the speaker a little bit, with just something so that it's not picking up those vibrations. Otherwise, and maybe not this iteration, in the future, we might have to look at that. So thrust it's essentially the parts of stab without the clash. But because there's no second movement, it makes it easier to trigger. And because it makes it easier to trigger, I can understand maybe why those speakers are triggering it. So there might be a little bit of investigating with that, but knowing how thrust was set up, if your speaker's causing it, I don't have a lot of options really, unless we make thrust harder to create, which then makes it harder for people to use. So that one is right now, I do know of those reports, but I don't have an answer on that yet. And then twist was the one also. This twist goes all the way back to the color change fork with people having difficulty with it. Twist is a double move. You have to turn it one way and then back the other. So what we're getting from some people is they're maybe only turning the Saber one way, or they're kind of just shaking it. It actually has to rotate on that Z-axis back and forth in order to enable twist. And then push, which is the brand new one. Push right now is only being used for the force push in battle mode on my prop file. It does take practice. I still mess up with it a little bit, and the reason being, it's kind of you have to get used to pushing the Saber, but without coming to a hard stop. So what happens with it that I see, and even in my own use, is if you push and you stop that Saber really hard, you're going to trigger lockup, because that's an impact. So you have to get used to pushing the Saber forward smoothly with a little bit of speed, but letting it just finish out that movement, and you'll get the push. Technically, you can also pull it towards you. So if that feels, actually sometimes that feels a little more natural when I was testing, you can also pull it towards you. But the idea with push is that your Saber stays, and you can have your Saber held sideways, but that movement is forward and backward without changing the angle of the hilt. Whereas a swing obviously is a big change in it. So I did put this together just to kind of give some of that. All of these, practice makes perfect, and it's really just getting used to them. But I wanted to touch base with some of those, and I see the chat going, so let me catch up with the chat, see if I can answer any questions in there. The chat being on a different screen, so sometimes I don't catch everything. Let's see. Hey, Heckler. Yeah. Hey, great to hear. I don't know any installers personally that I recommend, so I would say research anybody. I've installed all my own. People ask me, who I see people listing all the time, but because I haven't done business with anyone, I really can't recommend somebody. I see a lot of people who look like they do great work, but because I'm not a customer of theirs, I can't vouch for the end product. So I would say, do some research. If you find somebody on the Proffieboard group or any of the other Saber groups on Facebook, or you come across any installers, let me see. Hang on. Actually, I should be showing this just so you guys know what I'm talking about. Best thing you can do is first of all, ask for some people who they've actually done business with and research it. Go, if they have like YouTube channels, if they have videos and stuff. It's really the best thing you can do. Unfortunately, in this hobby is really just due diligence and make sure that, first of all, they know what they're talking about, that they're reputable, and that they're going to come through for you. There are unfortunately some people out there who say, maybe make promises but don't keep them. But I don't have anybody I use because I build all my own. And I don't have anybody I directly recommend. Not that there aren't a ton of people that I'm aware of that do it, but because I have not been a customer of theirs, I can't speak to their end product. So research would be your best way to go about it. That's really the best recommendation. Let's see. Everybody else who I didn't get to say hi to, thanks for joining. Let's see, McTooth. False. Let's see what you're getting here. False stabs. McTooth, I'm thinking that's probably that thrust you're getting false stab on with the Princess Saber. Stab, that's a clash. That's what I had shown actually in the diagram that your now comment is hiding. So the stab on that we saw in the serial monitor was a clash with that vibration from the speaker. Clash, you can lower your raise your clash threshold, and that should fix stab. The issue that if you're getting it with stab on, I think you're going to get it worse with thrust on, because that's what I was actually trying to say earlier is because that stab contains that clash element, it doesn't get nearly as affected, and you have the ability to up the clash threshold, which should prevent stab from being seen. Thrust has no such threshold, and getting a threshold in there isn't straightforward. So it's thrust might actually be worse. You could try it, but what it is it's the speaker. It is from the serial monitors that I've seen from people. It is the sound of the in wave, particularly the very end of it. A lot of these in waves have a really sharp cutoff, and it vibrates enough. If your board's close by, that's what it looks like. If you have a way to kind of insulate that board so that it's not vibrating from there, I think that's probably your best bet. But if you can try thrust on, my expectation is if stab on is false triggering, thrust on is going to false trigger way worse. But try thrust on. If thrust on doesn't work, go back to stab on, but then increase your clash threshold, and that should clear it. It obviously makes the clash a little bit harder to trigger, but because of speaker vibrations just in some hilts and some chassis, there's really no way for the board to know the difference between something happening to it from the result of the sound versus something happening to it externally. So that's where that usually comes into play. Let's see. I think I'm caught up. Hey, Brian. Yeah, Max. Glad to hear you getting your parts. All right, so any other questions for battle mode or anything? That was where I was going with this. I do get sidetracked easily. The beta is actually moving pretty quickly. There's a few things left in the beta thread, which is also on TRA. So if you go into Professor Zorn's lab on TRA and you find the beta thread, there's only a few pieces in here that Frederick still needs to get some eyes on. So if anybody's doing the beta testing, or if anybody's interested in doing beta testing, definitely report your either pluses or minuses in terms of experience, just on the things that don't say tested by. Obviously test everything, but those are the last pieces that if they get tested and proved out, then technically Frederick will be able to move out of beta and have this be regular release. From everything that he's been saying, I think it's really close. He's just hoping to get a few more people to do a few of these things. And actually, effect sequence, I'm going to touch on that. I've tested it thoroughly, but more than one person needs to test something. But if you can, if anybody's out there beta testing and you've done any of these already, just report back in the thread. And that just tells Frederick that more people have seen it, that they haven't had any issues, and it helps him to move out of beta. A lot of the stuff's been pretty thoroughly tested, but of course, if anything comes up, definitely report it. So if you find something, you want to report it so that it gets fixed. We don't want to necessarily just rush out of beta. But most of this has actually been pretty thoroughly done already. So it's actually pretty close from what it sounds like, as long as we get the rest of this stuff tested. But all right, so let me go. I shouldn't have switched that screen. Let me go use my back button. This is where I wanted to get here. So we're going to talk about this today, but I wanted to let everybody know who's testing. I've added, so the effect sequence is it actually has a lot of uses, but effect sequence, if you want to test it, is for power save, which is one of the new functions that got added for the 5.2. These you can test out or you can build your own. What I'm going to talk about tonight, I just added these in, and this is what we're going to touch on, is using battery level. But I already have them up on the TRA thread, so I'm going to touch on these. These I've already built and tested, but I'm going to kind of give you guys a walkthrough of how you could build your own, because really, battery level has been around for, I think, since 3.9, but the uses for it have expanded with each release. And now at 5.2 and the addition of the actual battery level effect, you're going to be able to do a lot more. So let's get into that. And if you have questions, do add them in the chat. I'll keep peeking over. Let's see. Actually, let me see if I missed anybody. Oh, there's no button setup that I have. I only do 2 button in my prop file. The first reason is between Dimitri and SA22C, between the stock and the SA22C, they pretty much took all the controls for 1 button, so I wouldn't have anything unique to add. Theirs are close, but they're different enough that it's options. And secondly, almost all my sabers have 2 button because I always want new stuff. And what's going to happen, I can't speak to them, but just from setting up the 5.2 version, we're running out of controls because there's so much on Proffi. So it's going to come to a point where you're going to almost have to start picking what you don't want and building prop files around it. I like having it all. So most of my stuff and most of my sabers are 2 button, just because of that flexibility. But what ends up happening is for the 1 button, just in the new stuff that got added recently, some of the features might not be. You might have a really hard time doing them on 1 button now. I'm sure Dimitri and Matt are going to get in there and start putting their 1 buttons together. No button, I don't know how you would do most of the stuff with no button. It'd be tough. I mean, technically, battle mode being full gesture control, you might be able to do some of it. So, like, technically you could do lockup and clash full time because that is actually an option. You can do them full time. You can do the gesture ignitions and retractions. But then what's happening if you're using gesture ignition and gesture retraction, you're probably going to start losing the ability to change presets or the ability to, presets would be a tricky one. Also, if that saber goes to sleep on you, although I think with no button, I think that has no timeout on it. It'd be tough. You also blast would probably be almost impossible to trigger. So you're going to lose stuff. But technically, with the gesture control, you could have ignition, retraction, lockup, melt, clash, and drag just with gestures. But outside of that, because you're going to now take those gestures and use them for ignition and retraction, particularly ignition, a lot of the no button controls for like changing presets, etc., would go away. So you'd almost end up with like a single preset type deal. I'm sure somebody can do it. I don't know how easy it would be. Everybody's kind of chiming in on that. Technically, yes, I would say that there is enough controls to do some stuff, but I actually had to start doubling up controls with 2 button because of some of the new stuff. So you might end up dropping it, but there is a no button in there. Tom's right. I've never done no button, so that might be worth messing with. But the Saber IH doesn't have battle mode, so you'd have to almost get in there and take battle mode in and do it. I would say if you wanna I guess if you don't have the option to drill a button for a switch, that might be that's going to be limiting. There's some controls there that you could probably do some stuff, I would say, but I think you're gonna be pretty limited what you can get away with. Blaster blocks definitely. You're gonna lose. All right. Okay. All right. So I would say if you go to the wiki on GitHub, there's how to build a prop file in there, and if you familiarize yourself with it enough, and there's a few other guys who do prop files who might be able to actually give some pointers. No button's going to be. You're going to need to get really creative with it, but some of the functionalities in there that might make some of it possible. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Actually, that logo's from a little while back, but it hasn't been used. YouTube told me I had to start branding my stuff, so it's actually old and whatever. But thanks, appreciate it. Um, Multi-phase. Yeah, multi-phase is actually you have to turn multi-phase on. It's a define. So in the actually there's so many. I touched on this last week, but for anybody who missed it, there are a lot of defines, and multi-phase is one of the defines you have to do to enable. So is force push, and then all of these other ones. So in this thread about the battle mode, all the defines are there. But again, that wouldn't help with no button because I don't have a no button option on mine. So you wouldn't be able to get into this necessarily. I guess if you no, it wouldn't work. I don't think. I don't think you can pretend that you have no buttons. But yeah, but there's a multi-phase and force push. They are defines to activate. They're not automatically there. All right. So let's get back to this guy. So I'm going to switch gears just so I can get a little bit of this topic covered for everybody, and then I'll get back to your questions. All right, so where I was on battery level. So battery level's been around for a while. And actually, I have what I call the passive battery monitor is something I put together in OS 4, and I actually still use it on a lot of my Sabers. But the concept behind it now rolls itself out to a lot of places. So I wanted to touch on it because, I mean, if you have accents, if you have a crystal chamber, etc., you can put the battery level there. But if you want it on your blade now, there's a lot more options. So for setting up a battery level, this is just going to be a basic, simple one. So we're going to use a mix. Actually, I'll do it with the controls. So we're going to go into styles. We're going to grab a mix. All right, and what I want to do is I'm going to swap this color out for green, being if my battery's high, and red if my battery's low, and you can pick whatever colors you want. But then with the mix, what you're going to do is you're going to change this int function, and you're actually just going to put battery level in. And what's going to happen is now in the editor, it just keeps cycling. So it's going to start full green, and it's going to slowly descend down to red, and then it's going to reset to green. That's just showing the life of your battery just in a really compressed time. But if you just want a really simple style, this is what I use in a lot of the passive battery monitors. So when basically, again, battery level, any of the functions, they always work in that 0 to 32,768 scale. So when your battery's at full power, the value is going to be full, which means that it's going to show green. When your battery's at 0, technically, which it does, 0 is, I think, like 3 point something volts or whatever, but it's going to be red. So just using this simple thing as a color style lets you have a battery monitor visible just by color. But then you also have the ability to use battery monitor or battery level for the size of something. So this time we'll use an alpha layer. And what we'll do is we'll leave it, actually green makes more sense for a full battery. And what we're going to do is, again, the function. So battery level is a function. It's a function that's actually watching the amount of voltage coming from your battery and converting it into that 0 to 3768 range that we use for all the functions. And if you're not familiar with that, I have so many other videos covering it. But that's basically, in the Proffi world, in terms of being able to do all this stuff with functions, it's almost always going to be that 0 value up to that 32,768 value. And that translates out to your blade angle, your twist angle, your swing speed, your battery level, and all of these other functions. They're all just basically turn into numbers and math. So you can just use them for other purposes. So the int being just a fixed number, we're going to change this into battery level. And what will happen is, if we watch now, if this was an accent light, as your battery goes down, that green level is going to start to dim, which lets you do yet another way. So you can tell just by the brightness of your light or your accent or whatever. But if you want, you can also add that into a shape. And the shapes, again, we've covered a lot in the past, the shapes being the smooth step or The bump, let's do a smooth step with a battery level. So we're going to do smooth step again. It does sine. I want the position of the smooth step to actually be based on battery level. And then this is just a little trick. What I want to do is I actually want a fixed int, and I want a small negative number. Actually, yeah, 10 would be all right. We'll submit that. And what's going to happen now, and it'll reset. So this way, if I set battery level up this way, when I have the battery full power, it's going to be a full blade. And then as it drains, that blade is going to shrink. So if you wanted to set it up so that you could tell just as a percentage of your blade how full your battery is, using smooth step is pretty much the easiest way to do it. And what, again, for smooth step, if you're not as familiar with it, you want to go with a negative number. That way it starts to tip and moves backwards. If you had a positive number, it would start here and move. So we can actually do that. If you put a positive number in for the second value, submit, it's going to fill versus, so this is actually the opposite. So at the lower your battery gets, what ends up happening is the longer the blade becomes, so it doesn't make much sense. So you're going to want to keep that as a negative. But that just has to do directionally with how it's going to move. So now this is going to be, I've got this set up. So what this means is that when I set up, and there's a lot of ways we can use it. So I'm kind of building towards that. So I'm going to have the battery level dictate the size, the percentage of the blade that's lit, but I want it to also change colors. So I'm going to swap out the green, and I'm going to put that mix in that we did earlier. And actually I did it already. So I'm going to grab it here. And I'm just going to copy. I use keyboard shortcuts, but you guys can't see that, so I'll do it on screen. Submit. So now what will happen is if I set this up as my battery monitor, I'm going to actually have it get smaller and redder as the battery level drops. So you can run this, and you don't have to have red and green. It can be whatever color you want. So if you just wanted it so your blade is showing full lit when it's 100% and then almost no lit when it's 0%, but you want it to be the color of your blade, you could put your blade color in here. But all of these are now options. Now, how to use them is the next piece of the puzzle. So and this goes back to my library, and I'm going to grab one here because I want to show you a shortcut. So let's just grab a really easy style, and I've actually got one here. So for 3.9 and for OS4, I'm losing track of these OSs. I set up the passive battery monitor on it, and what it is, it's an emitter effect that triggers at certain points. So you can choose just on boot, which is just when you first power the blade. You can choose it when you change the fonts, which also does boot. You can choose it whenever you retract, or you can do all of them. But let's go with just boot. And I'm going to put this in the editor. And I'm not actually caring about what the base style is. I'm looking only for this first. So how you get these into play. And this is for full blade. If you just want an accent that does your battery monitor, you don't need to worry about this stuff. But this last transition, there's a few things about this. This transition, the first piece of it is it's a transition effect. Transition effects, again, do a lot of different things. You can have them trigger on anything. This is what makes the passive battery monitor work, though, is that it's not going to show this effect until, in this case, you do a boot. So what will happen is on effect boot, which is right here, it's going to do that transition effect. So if I have boot here, oops, not submit. Yeah, there it is. So by doing boot, you'll see this will change. And that's what happens with passive battery monitor. It's going to just light up, and this is timed to be very short, but it's going to do a small glow, and the glow will be green if it's full, yellow if it's medium, red if it's low. So we'll do boot again. On boot, there is a slight delay for your board to catch up, so that means it's road. Now again, because the emulation is doing it, you can have it go there. And then if you have, I see some people with accents. So in the accents section, oops, I'm on the wrong page. In the accents section on my library, which is at the very bottom, you can also choose the battery level. There is a bar graph, so I see Kim has a bar graph. There's actually already bar graphs built. So there's a battery level bar graph, battery level green, yellow, red, and then bright and dim. So you can choose out of here, or you can build your own, which is what I'm showing now. But if you do accents, I've already got a bunch of them built out. But again, everything you can build yourself, which is why I'm going to show this stuff. But so we've got this effect, right? And if I jumped around too much, just let me know. So I've got this effect, but this is just an effect. This would technically run all the time if I left this as a layer, which would be a little weird. So what I want to do is I want to put this into a transition effect. So I'm going to shortcut for this one, and hopefully I'm only going to have typos, but so I'm going to put a transition effect layer. And then if you remember, for all the transitions we've been building, you always have to do a tr concat. And then this one, I want to give it a little bit of flair, so I'm going to do a fade in for 500 milliseconds. Then I'm going to have this battery monitor show up. So I'm going to copy that, because if I just do it, actually I'll show you what's going to happen. If I just do it this way, and I just put another fade in, and then I end that transition, and then let's call it, we're going to have to use effect boot or effect new font in the editor, but we're going to have new options there. Let's submit that. So now if I do boot, it's going to fade in and out. And that's a little bit too quick for being worth anything. So what'll happen is we're going to repeat that battery level alpha layer that we just put together, and we're going to put a delay in. So I'm going to put a TR delay. Let's give it like 2000 milliseconds, and then I copied, again, I did it with keystrokes, but I already copied that style so I can repeat it. I'll show you here, paste there, submit. I missed something. I must have hit something. I missed a comma. There it is. So now it's going to only show for 2000 milliseconds when I hit boot. So that'll give you that battery effect. And now this is on boot. In the OS 5.2, which is where we're getting to, there's actually a new effect. It's called effect battery level, and it's underscore. So I think I have it in here for you guys already. Where's the line that's not broken? So right here, this is it. So you can build these battery level styles for anything you want. You can do it on the boot. You can do it on the new font. You can do it on retraction already, and that's in OS 4. In OS 5, effect battery level is in my prop file, and that's triggered by holding aux and pressing power, and it does that on demand. It will show you that value on your blade. So that's where we're getting to, is being able to do this. So what it is we typically, if you did the passive ones, they worked. I actually like the passive ones because I don't have to go and check, and if I turn my blade on and I see it's yellow, I already know I need to worry about the battery. But some people wanted to have the option to be able to just check it on demand. If you're at an event, or if you have it sitting on the shelf for a long time and you turn it on, the on boot would show you that. But this effect battery level lets you do it. And in addition to that, I actually have added a sound, which is described in here. There's a bunch of sounds that have been added. Where did I list them? Right here. So if you want, you can actually assign a sound to that battery level. The effect battery level, it's just called battery.wave. You can have 1, 2, 3, whatever. But that way you can also have a dedicated sound for when you're checking your battery level. But the effect is going to be whatever you build. So we built out those. We built out this one here. So again, you have to use boot when you're using the editor, because I still have this up. That's what you guys can't see. Sorry about that. So the ability to design a battery level. Now, you don't have to use the battery level for every piece of this. So if I wanted it to just be a blue, I can actually go and change this. So say I have a blue Saber and I just want my color to stay blue all the time. I'll just switch out this mix for blue. And then we'll check it out. We'll hit boot. And it would be only the percentage of the blade showing that effect. And these are set. I only have it set for the 2000 millisecond delay. Let's put that up to 5000 so it stays on the screen longer. Do boot again. And again, this display is going to always just go this way over a period of time. And then because there's a timing on the delay, it'll disappear on you. if you actually had your battery isn't going to drain that quick. If your battery is moving that quickly, you got some issues with your build you got to address. It would basically light up, show, and then fade out. It wouldn't be moving like that. The reason it's moving like that is this previewer just runs that 0 to 32,768 in a loop on purpose so that you can kind of get an idea. So now let's see another one. So you can also do even more with battery level, which is where I'm hoping to take everybody. Hopefully I'm not losing you because I think I went off on tangents. But let's change one thing up. Actually, we'll do it in here. I'm going to change this into a blinking layer. And why didn't you take? You don't like that? Why don't you like that? Oh, Brian, I did. I haven't loaded them on any Saber yet. I've been, but thank you for them. And I did listen to them, and they sounded cool. I was doing so much to get that 5.2 done that I pretty much cashed in all my free time into a single day to get that ready. And now I've been limited because I have responsibilities that I'm trying to catch up on. So I actually didn't do as much playing after I got that loaded up, but I did. Some of them I think I can I'll have use for. Other ones I actually have different ideas, but thanks for those. So I did get them. So Brian had sent over a bunch of sounds when he kind of saw the playback from last week with all the new sound names, and he created a bunch of them that could work with everything. So some of them, like a lot of times in my demos, I basically grab one sound from somewhere else on a different font and I just rename it because I'm not as good with creating sounds as like Brian or Jesse or all these other guys. So it was great to have those sent over, but I didn't get a chance to load them on anything because by the time I actually had the moment, I had already been doing so much else. But let me switch gears back to this. So, all right, I don't think it likes adding a layer in place of a color, but I'm going to do it anyway right here. Oh, you know what? We'll just put it as blinking. How about that? That'll make this easier. Let's put you back because that's going to get the layering will get a little tricky. Let's just do a style of blinking. All right, so what we're going to do is we can take that battery level. Again, it's a function. It's a function with a value of 0 to 32,768, and that's dependent. That's basically based on your actual battery level. We can use that as a function to control the X version of blinking. So we're going to hit the expand button here. And what that does, when you hit expand on any function, on any styles that have a function running them, it'll convert them. So it'll add the X, and then it converts these. So what we want to look for now is the time between blinks. So the time between blinks is right here. And what we're going to do is let's change this. Actually, we're going to just change this to, I want to scale this because we don't want to necessarily have a blink that takes 32,768 to run. That will be imperceivable. We also don't want to blink with 0. So we're going to use scale. And scale, I've covered this in a few different videos. Scale lets you change 0 and change 32,768 for any of the functions, and basically just put kind of like your bowling lane bumpers on it. So we're going to put scale in. Scale is going to have sign in it. We're going to take sign out. We're going to put battery level in, and then that lower limit, I want to keep that reasonable for a blink, so we'll do 100. Submit it, and then the upper. Let's do 4,000. Let's see what 4,000 does. I think I needed to go higher in my testing. We'll submit that. So now what will happen, let's just view it this way. Oh, I forgot I have the shrink on this guy. Yeah, I don't want you. I'm going to swap you out. Int. Okay, and let's So let's get you set up here. All right. Yeah, that 4,000 is not enough. And actually, you know what? We probably want something in here. Yeah, I thought I could memorize all this without notes. Let's go with this guy. Sorry, let me cheat for a second. I think I had that already in here. There it is, right there. That's the one I want. What did I do? Okay, I did do it twice. All right, so that's what we want. We want the battery level in here as well. Let's go to scale. Then I'll explain what I just was peeking at in a second. Scale battery level. 0 is off. 1,000 is on. Let's see if that's going to do what I wanted it to. Almost. Missing something. 500 and 1,000. Oh, 500. That's what I want. You shouldn't be 0. I don't remember what we did. All right, so that should be running better. There we go. I like this one better. All right, I was trying to do it from scratch. Let me dissect what I already have working for you guys. So here's what we've got on this one. Is I have the mix set up. So I did blinking X. I have it as black. Oh, I reversed it. That's what it was. Got to take better notes. All right, so blinking, the off color is black. The on color is going to be the mix of green to red. So what's going to happen is when it's full, it's going to have a very slow blink in green. And then as that battery drains, it's going to blink faster and become red. And all we did, and this is where it got a little messy for me, is I had to remember the values. For the second value in blink, the on, off, by having the second value here in this scale, so when the battery's full, having full scale, you want it at 1,000. But in order to actually get blinking, you don't want to go down to 0, which was my first mistake. You want to go to 500. So that's halfway between on and off in blinking. If you drop blinking to 0, it ends up just staying off. So you always want to drop there. And then on the scale, yeah, okay, and the 4,000 was too high. I went, you want to go 100 for the milliseconds between and 1,000. And then, again, this could be any color you want, but I wanted to show that at full power, so when this cycles back to green, you'll see it stays static. And then as that battery starts to drop, it will blink slowly, and then the speed will pick up. And then it'll become yellow to red and then get really fast with the blinking. Again, this doesn't happen just like this because your battery doesn't drain that fast unless you have a battery issue. It's going to be on full green if it's at 100%. It's going to have a very slow blink in green if it's a little bit lower than 100. If it's halfway, it's going to be yellow and blinking medium speed. And if it's low, it's going to be a very fast red blink. But the editor just keeps cycling through, so you're not able to necessarily see exactly how it would show on Blade. But this style I actually already added in that battle mode section down in here for those of you who want to test it. So that would be this full blade, solid green when 100, fast blinking red when low. So that's this guy here, which I had already built. And again, we can also swap this effect out. So if I take this effect and say you like this effect, but you don't want to use the battery level, which again is the new control on my prop file. And I see the comments. So I'll catch up with comments in one sec. Let me drop that. We already did this. We'll drop it here. Submit. So now battery level is going to be no good because it doesn't exist in the editor. I'm sure Frederick will get these updated, but for now we'll just put boot in its place. So now when I do boot, it's going to show. Again, the cycling part isn't the big deal. It's going to run. So when you do your, if you want to set it on boot, you could set it on new font, you can set it on anything. It will go through, and you can see it'll be a solid green, full power, and then slowly that blinking will pick up speed, and it will also start turning yellow to red. So that's how you would be able to use those. So kind of a long roundabout way of getting to it, but the battery level function, you can put it in a lot of places to do a lot of different things, to be able to use it either as accents or on your blade using the new font or the boot or the new battery level. And basically you put them in a transition effect. That way, whatever effect, boot, new font, retraction, battery level, you trigger is when you see it. If you want it all the time, you don't need to worry about transition effects. You just put it on an accent LED. You put it on. You can put it on your PCB lights if you wanted. But battery level as a function is pretty flexible, and it lets you do a lot. So you can make any aspect of your Saber also let you know what's going on with your battery, which is, to me, it just gives you so much flexibility. And for those of you who have these really complex builds with multiple LEDs and stuff, you could even do a sub-blade, just have one pixel somewhere be your battery level, and you can program it so that you know what it means, but it could be in universe. You could have it so that it has a faster pulse or a slower pulse when it's low or whatever you want, and that's just part of the flexibility of it. So let me catch up with the chat. Oh, I missed a couple of these. Let's see. New sound. Yeah, there's okay, you already answered. Dimitri has his app that he's working on, and I forget what Frederick. There is something Frederick's used, but nobody used it, so it's kind of just sitting there. Max said that one we'd have to look up. I actually never even looked at that one, but Frederick had put stuff together to be able to do the web USB, I want to say it was, but it was built probably 3.9 or earlier, and it just never really gained traction. So it doesn't have a lot about it. Being able to use this web USB, that was it. Max said, those are pretty cool. The thing about the Bluetooth app though is the function has to be there. So like all of this stuff, you'd have to have it built ahead of time to be able to manipulate it on the Saber. So that's where the editor really is, to me, better, because you're just going to take these, you're just going to build this stuff out, test it here, and put it on your config, and then it's going to be there. Say you have a Saber that's running OS 4, and you wanted to add this battery level that I have. If it's not on the Saber, the Bluetooth app can't do anything about that, because the actual programming code that makes that possible doesn't exist. The Bluetooth app can adjust values that exist on the Saber. It can't create values that don't. So you did that. While the Bluetooth apps let you do things like changing colors and adjusting certain things, it's adjusting what's already on the board. Adding this kind of stuff to the board, you're still going to have to do through your config. Heckler, from your conversation earlier, I know you're still new to this and you're looking for somebody. Once you've done one or two uploads to the board, following the manual and asking questions, it's not hard. It's different if you're used to different boards, but it really is not all that difficult. Particularly, actually, I have a config open, particularly with the library, and I already know the questions are going to come. I will have an OS 5 library. It's going to basically be the same as the OS 4 library, with the new features added, but time is just not there yet. So I have a feeling it might take me a little while to get all this switched over. But you can use all the OS 4 styles. You can use all the old styles except for the color change fork on OS 5. But the new battery level, the power save, that's why I have those examples in my in the TRA forum, because I don't know when I'm going to get time to change this over to OS 5. But eventually there'll be an OS 5 version of the library, and you'll be able to just come in, and I'm just going to you pick your style. There'll be new options. So there'll be, instead of just the smart power save, there'll actually be the actual power save effect that you can add. There'll be more options for batteries. So the passive battery monitor, which right now is just boot and font change and retract, will also have that on-demand one added. But you can go in basically, and this is aimed towards Heckler, but anybody who's new, you go into the editor, you click this Get Style button, you build it out exactly like you want. And all this stuff you can change and add and whatever you want from all these options. Hit Get Style. It's in my clipboard. I'm going to go to this config. And if you've never seen a config, this might look like a lot, but it's not. And actually, we're just going to create a new one. And this is all inside of the manual. And I'm not going to actually load this, but I'll put this in. Name your font folder. So this is the font folder in the preset. This is the main font. Common for me is a backup, so any sounds that don't exist in my main font, I have a common folder that has them, so it'll look there for them. This is your track, which I always put my tracks in the same place, so it's easy for me to remember. Then I always close my bracket. And again, if you're brand new to this, it looks like a lot, but it's in the manual. And then I already have in my clipboard that style that I just built. I hit paste. That's it. And now that is all there. Oh, I'm not showing you guys my config. Oh, it's not enabled. My bad. Let me see if it will let me show you guys that. Let me switch over. Let's see. You get to look at me for a second while I try to figure that out. Yeah, I forgot the StreamYard. You have to pick what screens you want to show. Share screen. There it is. Wow. Switch back to that. There it is. All right. Sorry about that. Let me do that over for you guys. Control Z the heck out of that thing. All right. So, and this is only for new people, and this is going to be super abbreviated because time, but I copied that already, putting in my font name, putting in my common folder, putting in my tracks. I always go this route. And then right between these two brackets, this is a preset. A preset is made up of the font, and this is aimed for specifically for Heckler, but for anybody else who hasn't done this before. And there's a lot of videos that do this a lot more detailed and a lot better than I'm showing you, but I wanted to just touch base since adding styles seems to be something that people get, have questions about. So font name in the preset. So your preset is made up of beginning and an end bracket. That comma says there's more than one preset. This first value in quotations is my font. Now I have the semicolon to say that I actually have two folders to look at. So this is the primary font. This is, if anything's not found there, it goes there. This is your track. And then you put the comma there, and then you're going to paste the style that we just copied from my library, which is all this code that, if you've never seen it before, it looks like a lot, but that's just what tells it what to do. And it was already built for you from the library. And now you would just upload this config through Arduino, which again isn't as scary as it sounds, but adding these new features, again, really long road getting there. If you had the Bluetooth app, you wouldn't be able to add this like this. You would be able to manipulate something that was already on there. So for the ability to add the new features and stuff, those Bluetooth type apps, they don't necessarily give you that capability. But if you just have stuff on your Saber and you want to like adjust the color with an app, or you want to adjust, I think you can adjust speeds. I haven't actually ever used it, but you can adjust parameters of stuff that's on the board you can't add to the board. But let me dedicate the last couple minutes to any questions you have. Let me flip back here. Let's see, I gotta switch that screen out. Switch this back to something I can show. Oops. That's not what I want. And if you have a question, put it in the chat. I'm just trying to get that other screen up. And it won't let me. Why is that? That doesn't want. I must have clicked the wrong button. All right, you'll have to end looking at me, and I'll put the chat on. I think I clicked the wrong button on my other streamline. All right, let's see. Hey, Space, thanks for joining. Thanks, man. Hey, Jesse, glad you made it. You missed everything, though. I'm getting off in a couple minutes. But if anybody has questions, so I know I jump around, but the battery level stuff, I do have those examples. And now I can't show the screen because I clicked the wrong button. But the in the thread for the battle mode on the TRA forum at the bottom, I've added the four new styles for the battery level. And like I showed, if you put those in editor, the effect battery level doesn't exist. So you're going to get an error. But if you load them onto your config, you can use them. Same with effect sequence. Effect sequence, the one that's in that library, and I really wish I didn't close that screen, the one that's in the TRA thread, you're just going to drop those layers in. Actually, I got to get this. Let me get this back up because I really need to show one more piece. Bear with me. Let me see if it lets me back in. I think I clicked the wrong screen button when I was in there. Kept it from showing. Okay. Now, screen share. Browser is blocked. Browser is blocking it. That's weird. Let me see if I can get it to do it from here. No, I can't do it. All right, I'm going to have to speak to this one. Yeah, I hit the wrong button in my stream, and now the browser is not going to let me show it for whatever reason. So the defines don't actually add to the memory usage, but the controls that are assigned to them do. So, but they're minimal. I haven't done a full test, but what it is, the defines in the config, it just basically takes a piece of the prop file and either activates it or deactivates it. But how Arduino compiles everything is the pieces that aren't defined don't get added. So if you have no defines, that would be the smallest amount possible. With the basic prop file. If you have all the defines, there's going to be, half dozen lines, dozen or so lines of code per define, depending on the one. But I don't believe it's going to be like even a percentage difference. And that's just off the top of my head. So it shouldn't take up a ton more memory. The styles themselves are going to take more memory than the prop file is. Let's see. Yes, beta, and I spoke to this earlier, so anybody who joined late, OS 5.2 is in beta right now on the TRA forum. I did mess up my stream, so I can't show you the screen. Yeah, Mike, there was a question that popped on the screen from, I used StreamYard, and there was a question on the second monitor, and I clicked it, and now it keeps telling me that I've decided not to show that, and I think I have to probably close the whole browser out, which I just didn't have time for. So I think it was my fault. But in the TRA forum, the 5.2 beta thread is up. And the very first post has a list of stuff that still needs to be tested. If it has tested by next to it, that means it's been tested, and Frederick's happy enough to allow that piece to move. There's, I want to say 5 or 6 pieces in there that still needed somebody to use them and report back that they're working, or use them and report back that something's not working. And once we're past those, from my understanding, and again, Frederick controls this, but from my understanding, I think beta might go pretty quick. The alpha was pretty solid. There was a few edits and changes and some bug fixes, but it wasn't really heavy. So the alpha went really quick. The beta, there's not. My prop file probably has the most that needed to be tested, and it's been pretty well tested. So if you guys want to test out more battle mode and stuff and just report back, I did also say earlier the thrust on, if you have a speaker that's vibrating your board quite a bit, there's been a couple of reports of that. Well, We'll have to look. For right now, I don't know a way to get around that easily. So if you're having thrust on trigger your ignition because your retraction sound is so loud that it's vibrating the board in that manner, you might just not be able to use that feature currently, or lower your volume. Or if you can insulate the board, that'd be great. But everything else is really well tested, except for those last pieces. So if you go to TRA forum, sorry I can't show it, and you look at the list that Frederick has in the first post, there's a few items in there that don't have a tested by in parentheses next to them. Those are what need to get looked at if you're able to. So if you don't know how to do it or you're not familiar enough to play with that stuff, don't worry about it. Somebody will. But those are the last pieces. And then once those are tested, if there's no other bugs reported, I have a pretty good feeling Frederick will move this to actual full release. So anything that comes up will be addressed. But it's basically if you go and test it out. Yeah, Mike. If there's if you're in there testing and if you use a feature and it works as you expect it without a bug, or if it has a bug, you report it. Just post in that thread that, hey, I tested this out and it works fine. Or if you have a question. So a couple of the new ones, particularly the circular section F and marble F, Frederick built those for a specific purpose. I actually asked him for some write-up, so he's going to put a write-up together on those. He would be the best person to ask about those. Those were, if you didn't see his Obi-Wan Kenobi hilt that he built with the zigzag blade and everything else when he did his video on introducing Proffieboard 5. Excuse me, I'm talking for too long. He added a ring of LEDs in the pommel, and he created that circular section F and marble F function specifically so that it does this little light effect based on how much you move the saber around, almost as if there was a marble in there. But I don't have that set up anywhere to test. So when I tested on the straight blade, it worked in terms of it loaded and did something, but it's nowhere near the same. So I told him that I had tested it, but I think he wants somebody who's got something similar to his setup, or he's going to do more write-up. But you can test those out. You'll have to ask him on those. Those functions are actually really complicated. I had to use his example to test it, but I'm sure it'll be more write-up. And effect sequence is in the, again, I can't show the post. That's what runs power save. So if you want to load those power saves that I have up in that battle mode thread and test them out, just report back that they're working properly. I did talk about effect sequence last week. And if there's questions, I can maybe try to answer them again the following week. But effect sequence was just something we needed another set of eyes on. I think there was like one or two other things, but it's pretty close. So we'll be out of beta once everything's tested, and dependent upon any future bugs that get reported. But if you find a bug, that actually helps, because if we find a bug when one or two people are using it, then it gets fixed right away, and then nobody else experiences it. If this goes out in the wild and the bug hits everybody, all of a sudden you get all these messages come in. So it's always better to find a bug early in beta or in alpha than to miss it and have it release and then have everybody report it. Because then, people who aren't as familiar with the OS in particular, when you have something go wrong, it's frustrating, it's scary, it can turn some people off. So, yeah. Let me catch up with everybody, and then I'm going to cut out in a moment or two as well. But yeah, sickly. I mean, when I saw that, it was really cool. I don't have any kind of setup like that I could do that. So I wasn't able to test it, but he's got, I mean, the stuff Frederick comes up with all the time is awesome. Let's see, Gary, thanks for joining. Let's see. Yeah, so moving from 3, I think it was 3.6 to 3.9 was just some fixes. 4 came out and moved pretty quick, and then 5 was out already. So yeah, I had somebody message me. They were still on 1.312, and they had no idea that 2, 3, or 4 had released. So yeah, it is moving fast. I'm happy to help. Like I've said before, I love putting this stuff together and sharing it. But yeah, the OSs are moving quick. So jumping from 3.6 to 5, you're going to have a lot of really cool stuff to play with. So the all the stuff that came out in OS 4, if you haven't used the responsive stuff, that stuff is awesome. And now with all this new gesture stuff and everything, I think it's going to be like brand new Sabers for you. So enjoy. Let's see. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, just try. Yeah, if there's anything you can test it out. If not, I know a few other people are also going to jump in there. Hey, Max. Oh, I missed Max saying goodbye. Actually, yeah, that's probably going to be my cue. So, thanks everybody for joining tonight. And if you do have other questions, I'll be back on next week. We can address them there. If you have a question you want me to try to get, specifically onto it, you can message me either on Tayore or just through the YouTube channel. Just shoot a message. I try to, when I get questions from some people, if I can make it work in this setting, I'll usually put it together. Sometimes the question is really easy to answer, and I'll just give you a reply. OS 5 is moving pretty quickly, so we'll be out of beta once everything's tested and Frederick gives it the green light, and then be on to even more new stuff. So thanks everyone, appreciate it, and I'll catch everybody soon. Have a good night.